Hello, I'm David Leitner, and welcome to Part 4, a look at Canon's Cinema EOS workflows. Now, before we get started, we're going to talk in this segment mostly about 4K and 2K recording and capture and workflows, but I want to make a few notes about the 1DC. The Canon 1DC, which is also part of this family, which records 4K, doesn't record or output RAW. It records a 500 megabit per second motion JPEG compressed image. Now, motion JPEG's been around for a while, and any NLE can edit it, as long as it can handle 500 megabits per second, which is a fairly high bit rate, but nonetheless. So its workflow is nothing special. So I won't spend much time talking about the 1DC, except to mention that inasmuch as it's capturing compressed video, it's using the video gamma version of Canon log. All of the HD that the C100, C300, C500, and the 1DC capture, all of the HD video can avail itself of the Canon log video gamma, which is the gamma that compresses the image in terms of contrast to try to preserve the highlights. Now, all four of these cameras can also offer what's called view assistance, which is a LUT, a lookup table, that allows you to view, as you're shooting, the image as it will appear after the Canon log has been color corrected and the contrast has been reconstructed. On the 1DC, you see that in the live view window on the back, and the other cameras in the LCD or in the viewfinder. Now, when importing clips shot with Canon log gamma, it's easy to automatically apply a viewing LUT on your laptop or on the screen that you're using with your NLE by using Canon's XF utility. It's an import function which also provides that viewing LUT. You can almost immediately view, upon importing, the reconstructed contrast and also the full tonal scale that Canon log has preserved. What I do, I tend to use Final Cut Pro 10, which takes no time at all. It's very fast. And then instead of using a LUT, I just adjust the contrast myself. I just drop the blacks, raise the highlights, and presto. It's very fast. So there are several ways to skin the cat here, and they're all satisfying, and they're all very fast. Canon log gamma is a wonderful video gamma to use, and I use it almost exclusively with these cameras. Now, when you're recording RAW, you're also availing yourself of Canon log, but RAW, of course, is outputting all of the data that the sensor is capturing, and the Canon log is applied upon demosaicing and processing the image. How do we capture 4K and 2K from the C500? Well, I know of at least 7 devices that will do that, and I'm going to show you a few of them here now and list the other ones that we don't have. These are all compact, and you can call them onboard recorders because none of them are any larger than what you see here. The first one is the Aja Key Pro Quad here. And the Aja Key Pro Quad compresses 4K RAW to ProRes 4444. Why does it do that? Well, the compressed ProRes files are much smaller than the original 4K. Now, what that means is that the Aja Key Pro Quad has to debayer the incoming 4K before it can capture it to ProRes. As you know, ProRes 4444 is very popular in high-end television production these days. It captures that ProRes to this small solid-state drive, this SSD. This is looks like a 1.8-inch SSD. It's in a cartridge that Aja has created. There are 2 slots on the top, and you just pop this in like that, and you're off and running. There's a Thunderbolt pass-through on the Aja Key Pro Quad, and why would you want a pass-through? Well, if you're outputting 4K into the Aja Key Pro Quad and saving that is ProRes 4444, you might want to preserve the original 4K for some future use, perhaps a telecast 5 years in the future, which might actually be 4K. Well, you can do that by passing through the 4K signals and capturing them with another device or another technology that can capture raw 4K. Meanwhile, you're capturing ProRes here. Now, we have the codecs S over here. The Codex Digital Raw Onboard S recorder uses a 512 gigabyte SSD to capture 28 minutes, in this case, of full 4K RAW at 24 frames a second. As you can see here, it's very easy to get this SSD out, 28 minutes, and when you've filled this up, you then hand this off to somebody in production, and they pop it into something called the Vault offload station that Codex has developed as a companion to this product. And the Vault facilitates backing up, logging, debayering, transcoding. It also attaches to RAID storage and LTO modules for backup. Now, another recorder, onboard recorder, is the S2 OB2. I'm afraid we don't have one here to show, and in fact, it's in development. But S2 has a real reputation for raw recording, so you know it's going to be a wonderful device that works well. Now, Convergent Design has come up with two solutions, two separate onboard recorders for 4K. The first is the Gemini 444. Now, to capture 4K with a Gemini 444, you need a firmware update, and Convergent Design and Canon have gotten together and they've created a Canon 4K Cinema RAW option. When you have that firmware update loaded and in place, then the Gemini 444 can capture 10-bit 4K RAW up to 30 frames a second. It also provides a debayered preview and playback on the spot. There's a built-in 5-inch display here, a little monitor, and you can see what it is that you've captured. In addition to which, if you want to record at a faster frame rate, say as high as 60 frames per second 4K RAW, you can use two Gemini 444s. They're designed for this, dual Gemini 444s, and you can capture 4K RAW up to 60 frames per second, or uncompressed HD up to 120 frames per second. It's a very small device, as you can see. Convergent Design's other product is the Odyssey 7. Now, this is a prototype. We're very fortunate to have this here to show you. And this is an amazing device, too. It captures Canon 4K RAW up to 60 frames per second, no firmware upgrade required. And it is remarkably thin, as you can see. It has two slots on top, and each slot contains a 2.5-inch SSD, solid-state drive. There's another one right here. And they can be used for either relay recording from one slot to the next or redundant recording. It's kind of like RAID 1 where you mirror the same signal onto both. Now, what sets this recorder apart from every other one of these recorders, even the Gemini, is it has a 7.7-inch OLED monitor built into the front. And that's remarkable. It's a 1280 by 800 pixel display. So if you want, you see how, again, how thin this is? You can use this just as a monitor. But if you wish to use this as a dual slot 4K recorder, you can do that as well. I think it's going to be a very popular product. Now, Astro has an HR7510 recorder. We don't have one of those here, but I can tell you that it records uncompressed 4K, 4K half RAW, and 2K up to 60p, 60 frames per second, and it also offers real-time debayered output. You can look at what you've just captured debayered in real time. Now, Keisoku Gaiken is making a product called a UDR N50A. I haven't seen that either, but that's in the works, and that also is small, compact, and it records uncompressed 4K. All of these could be attached to the rear on rods behind the C500. Because this is a monitor, the Odyssey, it could be attached in front, so there are many possibilities. Now next, I want to talk about Canon Cinema Raw Development Software, CRD. Cinema Raw Development Software. Because 4K coming out of the C500 is like an unprocessed negative, motion picture negative, we often speak of developing RAW. We have to take RAW and somehow convert it to something we can look at, and we call that development. It's an analogy to developing film. So Canon Raw Development Software, CRD, what does it do? It debayers 4K RAW. And what it creates are .rmf files, raw media format file stacks, which you can play back, preview, or export. On your hard drive, you'll see it's .rmf. You probably haven't seen that before. What it also does, what Cinema Raw Development Software also does, is it debayers and transcodes not only to 4K.RMF files and DPX, but also to .mov, which you'll recognize as Apple's QuickTime format, as well as proxy HD and SD files for editing. Those are both transcoded and reduced down to either HD or standard def. Now at NAB this year, Canon announced an update to their Cinema RAW development software, and that update adds support for ASUS. ASUS is the Academy Color Encoding Specification, which is to become a standard for handling color and ensuring the uniformity of color on every display device from the set all the way through to the post-production house. And that's a kind of a holy grail. That's something that all of us who worked in capturing film and video and digital have all desired for a very long time. Well, finally, the Academy has brought together a whole circle of experts to try to figure out how to do this. And they've come up with ASUS, Academy Color Encoding Specification. You're going to be hearing a lot about this in the coming years. What Canon has added into their cinema development software is a new device transform function that can output the developed cinema RAW files, the .RMF files, into an ASUS-compliant OpenEXR file format. Now, what's an OpenEXR file format? It's kind of like a container format, but it's a high dynamic range file format. It was developed by ILM many years ago, 16-bit per channel floating point, and it captures a dynamic range of 30 stops. So this is not going to become obsolete anytime soon. The user can specify with Canon's new update to its cinema development software, can specify in and out points for developing and copying the raw footage and converting it to OpenEXR. So it streamlines your workflow in that you don't have to convert everything. If some of your raw capture you know is meaningful and you're going to use it, well, you only have to convert the sections that you want. On the set you can do it, or you can do it in post. Now the user can also create a development log in the process that lists the details of the files that were copied or developed using CRD for future reference. Now, just for a moment, I want to go into a little bit more detail about ASUS, because ASUS is the future of color management. It was proposed by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences as an open source file format based on OpenEXR, which I just described. It introduces a color transformation language. It's going to be called CTL. It's a programming language designed for color transforms. It preserves custom looks and eliminates the uncertainty before on-set look management and downstream color correction. In other words, it eliminates the possibility that what you see on the set and what you see in color grading will be different. It will be exactly the same, including the display devices. They will match. It simplifies, therefore, the visual matching of different cameras on location. It provides a reliable and an unambiguous interchange of images from all film and digital sources. It defines the color response for both input and output devices for an end-to-end color management, again, from filming to editing, grading, distribution, and screening. You'll never again live in an NTSC world, and I'm not talking about analog video. I'm talking about never twice the same color. That's the world we've inhabited for all these years. ASUS will serve as a standardized archival format, and that means going forward into the future, if you use an ASUS-compliant OpenEXR file format, in the future, when that's opened up, the color that you determine today will be viewed exactly the same way in the future. ASUS preserves the highest quality images for use with next generation display technologies, 4K, 8K, and beyond. So ASUS, as I mentioned, is kind of a holy grail. It's something that we've been waiting for a long time, and Canon Cinema Development software contains ASUS-compliant functions within. So that's a big deal, and that's why I've gone to the trouble to explain it to you. Now let's look at some of the actual workflows. Raw recording, we've captured from the C500 into one of these devices, 4K RAW. What do we do with it? Well, we put it through Cinema RAW development software, CRD software from Canon, and we create these OpenEXR files. Then what do? We take the OpenEXR files and we color grade them, and then we deliver them. Now, I didn't mention editing because I just described a workflow where you're simply warehousing for the future. And using ASUS, in the future, when they're looked at again, they'll look exactly the same. Here's another workflow. You've recorded 4K RAW or 2K RAW. You've gone through a CRD process, a Cinema RAW development process. But in the process, you've made offline proxies. You've transcoded down to HD or SD, and you've then taken those and gone and edited those on a standard NLE. Then you go back and you conform the OpenEXR files that you made in Cinema RAW development. You grade the OpenEXR files, and then you deliver the result. So that gets you from RAW to a 4K delivery. A third workflow, remember I said, of course, the C500 can internally record simultaneous MPEG-2 50 megabit per second proxy files. Well, they could be used as HD masters. They're very high quality, but if you're shooting 4K or 2K, they can be used as proxy files, and you can edit those on any existing NLE today. So instead of making down converting from 4K in Cinema RAW development software, you can simply record simultaneously onto compact flash cards while you're in production. And those compact flash cards can go straight to the editing room, and even while you're shooting, an edit can be taking place. Now, when you're done editing that HD proxy, you take the result, you go back and you conform the OpenEXR files, go through a grading process, color grading process, deliver. Here's a fourth workflow suggestion. You've recorded 4K RAW, and you've recorded it to something like the Aja Keypro Quad, which records to a compressed ProRes. Then you go online, or you could call it offline, either one, because you can, using Final Cut Pro 10, you can easily edit those 4K ProRes files on your NLE. This is a workflow that doesn't involve Cinema RAW development software. You've simply recorded the RAW in the first place as compressed ProRes or DNx HD, and you've edited them in a conventional way. You then go to a grading process and you deliver. And that's how a lot of high-end television is done today. It's shot with other cameras and captured to ProRes 4444, edited immediately, and so much of the workflow is so streamlined because so many other steps have been deleted. So that is a fourth suggestion for workflow. Now, a note about 4K in post. 4K requires, at minimum, 4 to 5 times as much storage as HD did, or even more depending upon the bit depths that you're recording to. So you've got to keep that in mind. It's a lot of hard drive space, much bigger hard drives, and you're also going to need faster pipes. Thunderbolt drives are highly recommended at this point. As a rule of thumb, with these high bit rate formats, your laptop or your workstation for playback and editing should be no older than your camera. So you're going to have, if you get into the 4K game or even the 2K RAW game, you have to keep abreast. You're going to want to update your workstations or the computer you use for your NLE. Now, lastly, ergonomics. Fantastic. I remember when to capture RAW, you had very, very large systems that were the size of small refrigerators, and that was only a few years ago. So these are each modern miracles. They're very compact, they're very light. This is a handheld rig. I could easily have that Codex S recorder on the back. I would hardly feel the weight. They're not heavy at all. The Aja Keypro Quad, the Codex S, the Convergent design, both the 444, Gemini 444, the Odyssey 7, all of these attach easily to the back of a C500. As I mentioned, the 7 actually may be used in front because it's also a fantastic OLED monitor. Now, battery and audio receivers may also be put back in the back. Will change the weight of the camcorder in terms of its handheld balance, But all of these things are fairly small now. Canon itself uses a small battery, as I demonstrated earlier. It's all good. The ergonomics of capturing 4K are now portable, and that's my point. Now, in our next section, we're going to look at the universe of lenses that these cameras make possible, EF, EFS, and PL mount lenses. We're going to look at these Canon Cinema lenses that were designed to record better than 4K images. So join us.
Whether you're a hobbyist or a professional, B&H has the answers to your questions. Experience a world of technology at our New York City Superstore. Connect with us online or give us a call. Our staff of experts is happy to help.